Most people sending cards to a grading company shouldn't be sending them at all. And I don't mean that in a harsh way. I mean that in a reality check kind of way. Because the difference between a 10 and a 9 is not luck. It's usually something that you missed, and that mistake cost you money. I've graded hundreds of cards at this point. Pulled cards, bought cards online, and then submitted cards. And I can tell you right now, most submissions fail before they even get sent out. So today, I'm going to break down how to actually look at your cards, what matters, what doesn't, and how to stop sending in cards that are never going to gem. Welcome back to Entei's Inferno. If this is your first time here, as always, my name's Kris, with a K, and this is where we talk about the Pokemon hobby from a collector and a vendor perspective, but more importantly, how to actually get better at it. Now, if you enjoy this type of content, or just like hearing my sexy voice, make sure you follow the podcast and check out my content on Instagram at Entei's Inferno TCG. Alrighty, let's get into grading. Here's the biggest problem. People fall in love with a card that they pull or a card that they buy, not the condition. They pull something cool and immediately think, oh man, this is going to 10. And I get it. You want it to be a 10. But PSA doesn't care how much you like the card. Or whatever grading company does not grade your excitement. They grade the card itself. So you have to take the emotion out of it. If you really, really like a card, and let's just say it's the Umbreon from Celebrations, the Umbreon Gold Star, right? Now this is one of your favorite cards. Do you think it's worth the risk if you're going to go grade it yourself if you've never graded before? At that point, find the card, buy the card, get it in the grade that you want. Now, if you don't care and you're just sending in cards because you want them to be preserved in a grading and authenticated way, and you don't care what the grade is, then all means send that card without looking at it first. But if you don't look at it first, it's probably not going to be as good as you think. Now, there are 4 things that actually matter, and I want to break it down as simple as possible for you. Number 1, centering. Now, centering is one of the most important things about grading a card. The front matters more than the back. If the front or the back, for example, is a little off-centered, it's okay. And by a little off-centered, I mean you can't tell with the naked eye that it's off-centered. Now, the front is a lot more valuable. If the front is clearly off-center by any means, by the naked eye, just looking at it, you feel like something's a little off, then yeah, you're cooked. Number 2, edges and corners. This is where most people fail. You got whitening, tiny dots, and corner digs. Now, what a lot of people don't realize, I don't know if you've ever heard of feathering, but a lot of cards will have feathering on the sides. Feathering on the sides basically means there's like little fuzzies, and that card's not going to gem. So keep that in mind. One tiny white dot can actually turn your 10 into a 9 instantly as well. So check the corners, and you're going to say, Kris, what's a white dot mean? It literally is a white dot. It looks like the paint of the card, like the blue paint of the back of the card, is actually missing in the corner. Sometimes it may not be an actual white dot. It could be a speck. It might just fall right off. So always gently see if that little white speck comes off the card. If it does, you're good. If it's on there, you're most likely not going to get a 10. However, if there's one tiny little white dot, there's a chance that they'll overlook it and not care. I've seen plenty of cards get it that way as long as the rest of the card is flawless. But on the side of caution, once I see a white dot, I normally do not grade it. Now, number 3, the surface of the card. This is a silent killer. Things like scratches, print lines, dents. Now, scratches come a little bit more prominent on the front of the card for vintage cards. I've noticed a lot of scratches, especially on newer cards, are on the back. It's very hard, especially with illustration rares and art rares and stuff like that, to see scratches on the front. But the back of the card typically has print lines or dents. Now, when I'm checking cards, I tilt them under a light. And by a light, I mean those like LED white lights, those circle lights that all the social media influencers use, and probably a lot of content creators as well. You know, the light that you see in their eyeballs that's a white circle? That one. So I use that. I have it above my desk when I grade cards. And I have it tilting down, and I take the card in my hand, and I will change its angle so that way the light hits off the card a certain way. And by doing that, I can see print lines, I can see dents, and I can see scratches much better than just holding it in a normal light. Now, if your card has a print line, I'm sorry to tell you, but it's not going to 10. However, I will stop myself there because I did just talk to a gentleman at my last show who pulled the SIR Zekrom from Black and White, and it was flawless. He turned it over, and there's a slight, very tiny, faint print line on the back. He said, screw it, sent it in, expecting it to come back an 8 or a 9. He got a 10. Now, I will say, that is not what happens most of the time. Most of the time, it's almost an automatic 8, never mind a 9. So his card must have been absolutely flawless all the way around, or they overlooked the print line. One or the other. Or maybe the grader was just in a good mood that day. That's a risk that you're always taking. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is grading modern cards versus vintage cards. Now, modern cards, PSA 10 is everything. PSA 9 is basically raw value at this point. The fact that a PSA 9 modern card is basically raw, it's one of the most frustrating parts of grading. However, vintage is a different story. A vintage card in a PSA 8 or a 9 is amazing. Even sometimes in a 7 is great. They are much harder to gem. Not only because they're older, they've been through a lot more wear and tear, things like that. But the thing that people don't realize is that when a grader gets a vintage card, even a mid-era card, they're typically a lot tougher. And the reason why is because the population of these cards are lower. So they are basically trying to be as hard of a grader on those cards as possible to keep the appeal of vintage. Because if they're just handing out 10s left and right, then you lose the value of the 10. So a lot of the times they are aware that they're grading vintage, and it just makes it a lot tougher. Doesn't mean there's not perfect mint vintage cards out there that you could grade, but they're a lot harder to come across. Now, I know you might have heard me mention this saying before in one of my past episodes, but this is huge. Is the lemon worth the squeeze? Before you grade, ask, what is the cost of the card? What is the grading fee? What is the shipping fees? And what's the timeline going to look like? Then ask yourself, if this gets a 10, is it worth it? If it gets a 9, did I just waste money? If the math doesn't math, don't send the card. Now, for example, I've talked about this before. I'm trying not to stay on this too long, but if a card you're going to send it in is worth raw value $20, the PSA 10 value is $50, and it's going to cost you $20 to grade the card, maybe $5 to ship the card. Do you think it's worth it to send a card that maybe you believe in that might get value one day? Do you think it's worth grading that card that you bought for $20 or pulled for $5, let's call it, or $10, whatever the pack was, and then you graded it for $20, so now you're at $30, and then you paid $5 for shipping, the card was a little more expensive, you're at $40 already, the card's in PSA 10, if it does gem, it's worth $50. If you are flipping it or selling it, then you just took the chance to make $10. to me, doesn't really sound that appealing. Now, maybe for you, it's something that you want for your PC. That's a different story. That's not what we're talking about. If you want that, doesn't matter. Send the card. You're keeping it regardless as long as you're okay with the 9. And that full circle back to why you ask yourself if the 10 is worth it and if the 9 is okay and did you waste money. Now, how do I personally decide what to grade? I want to talk you through my system. So I sit at my desk. Anytime I pull cards, anytime I buy cards off eBay, maybe for my inventory, anything of the sorts, I make a pile of cards that come in and I'm like, oh man, that's clean at first glance. I will then sit at my desk, turn that fancy light that costs $20 on Amazon, turn that on above me, and I will take each card out of the sleeve, out of the top loader, look at it front and back. I will first check the centering of the card, see if it's worth it to grade. Because if it's obviously off center, it's not going to be worth it. One trick I did find is if you turn the card upside down, I don't know why this happens, but if you turn the card upside down to look at the centering, for some reason it's easier. I think you don't get as distracted by the art. So that is a nice little trick that I do use, and I was taught by a friend of mine. Moose Collects, shout out. Next, I check the edges. Now, I'll run my finger across the edges very, very, very gently. Make sure you don't give yourself a paper cut, but I will run it over because sometimes you might not see a ding or a dent, but running your finger over, you could feel a little indent. And right there, boom, don't send it. Not worth it. How do cards get dings and dents? Well, for example, some cards are promo cards. They come in a holder of sorts. And when that holder, maybe it's in a tin or something like that, it's not in a sleeve, it's not protected at all, and it might push into the card, so that might cause a dent. Somebody dropping the card. Maybe you dropped the pack before you opened it. All types of things can happen to the card. Because until it's pulled out of the pack, put in a sleeve, and put in a top loader, it's not truly protected at all. Next is I use that light that's above me to look at the surface. Now I'll angle that card left and right, up and down, flip it, check both sides, because using that light with the angle that it hits, I can see if there's dents on the face, dents on the back, I can see if there's print lines, I could even see if there's white dots or specks. And this is one thing I'm going to talk about, because a lot of people hear the word cleaning cards. People clean cards. People make a business out of cleaning cards. And if you make a business out of cleaning cards, what they do is they use a solution, they do all those other things. Great, awesome, good for you. Some people could take dents out with humidity. It's like a science project. I can't personally do that. Commend people that do it. But when you do it, you need to be careful, because if people use a solution, some grading companies will look for that solution. They'll test for that solution. If that solution comes up on your card, they will not grade it at all. They will send it right back to you. They will consider that tampering with the card or changing or altering the card. Now, what you can do to clean a card yourself is, and I do this, I could take a Q-tip. When the card is out of the sleeve and it's raw in my hand, I will take that Q-tip and slightly just from center to edge, push the dust off. Because sometimes there's some white specks on there. You might be thinking, oh, it's a white dot. I'm toast. I'm not going to be able to send this in. Sometimes by just doing this, you may be able to push it off. You don't push hard. You don't do anything. You don't wet the cotton swab either. If you wet the cotton swab, I mean, it's cardboard, people. If you put water on cardboard, they don't mix well. So don't do that either. But one of the biggest things is you need to make sure that you are going center to edge. I'm going to emphasize this again. Why? Because if you go edge to center, you can accidentally peel up the edge of the card. You could ding the edge of the card. You could do a lot more damage than good. If you go center out and you go lightly and push all the way off the card, you can sometimes get little specks off or little pieces of dust that you thought was on the card and it's not actually on the card. That's all I use it for. Now, the last thing you need to ask yourself, and then the last thing I ask myself, would I be happy with a 9? And sometimes I am. Sometimes there's cards that are just really, really cool cards that people want. And if you're going to be flipping or you're a vendor or something like that, I'm okay with a 9 on a certain card. If I'm not going to be happy with a 9, I don't send it. There's a big learning curve after sending cards. And from my experience, I've been burned enough sending hundreds of cards that I've learned some things help and some things don't. Now, another thing I do want to mention is, how do you prep a card? Not so much clean it, but prep it. So if you're sending to a grading company, for example, when I send a PSA, I use the PSA box that was given to me on my recent return to ship a card out again. Because one, I know that they use those boxes, so they must like them. Two, I know the cards fit. And three, it shows them that I've graded with them before if they get it, because it literally has their logo on the inside. So I try to do every little thing to help me with the PSA graders or with the grading company that I'm sending it to. Next step is you take this card. After you look at it, you do whatever you got to do, make sure it's good to go. You'll take that card raw, put it into a penny sleeve. I highly recommend not using a perfect fit penny sleeve. I actually think some grading companies tell you not to use it specifically because it is very hard for the grader to get that card out of the perfect fit sleeve and without damaging it. And they want to do as much as they can without having an opportunity of damaging the card. So you put it in a normal penny sleeve. You take this penny sleeve, now you're going to put it in a card saver, not a top loader. So the card savers are different. They're airtight, they're sealed. There's a bunch of different companies that use it. I used Card Saver 1, which is recommended by PSA. Once again, if they recommend something, I want to use it because I want to make their life as easy as possible. Now you're taking this card into a penny sleeve, into a card saver. Card savers are a little bit different than top loaders. You do have to take the card. I'm going to try my best to explain this without pictures. Hold the card on the top as you pinch the sides of your card saver. One finger on the back of the card, your thumb on the front of the card. You are going to try to pin your back finger that's on the back of the card to the back of the card saver, between the card saver and the card, and then slide the card into the card saver. Gently down. Don't force it. If it doesn't go in, pull it back out, push it back in, whatever you got to do, but do not force it. And then once you do it a couple times, you get used to it. So once it's in the card saver, it's sealed tight. Big misconception from what I've heard, I'm not 100% sure on this, and I'm sure somebody will tell me in the comments, but pretty sure that PSA doesn't actually take your card out of the card saver. They actually cut the card saver off around it, so that way they don't have to manhandle your card at all. Now that I've talked about what to look for with the card, how to put the card together, let's talk about packaging your card. So I talked about I use the PSA box. Now, if you're sending a bunch of cards, if you're sending a bulk tier, or you're sending something along the lines where you're going to have 15, 20, 25 cards, I know a lot of grading companies are going to ask you to input the cards into their system and then match it in order. Now, one of the other tricks I like to mention is if you're going to be sending a bunch of cards and you have a bunch of cards from the same set, keep them together. And not only keep them together, but actually put them in order of the set. It doesn't have to be perfect order, but if you put the cards in order, and what I'm talking about is the number of the card on the bottom. So the number of the card on the bottom, if it's one of the, let's just say, I actually have a stack that I'm sending out right now in front of me. Ascended Heroes, right? So the Ascended Heroes cards that I'm sending the Mega Rare Gengar, and I'm sending the Mega Rare Dragonite. Now, with those two cards, the bottom left tells you their number. I'm going to put whichever one is first in numerical order, and then the second one in numerical order, because they're within the same set. And my vision is that when I send it to the grader, and the grader opens up my box and they start grading my cards, they will thank me, and in the back of their head be like, wow, this made it a little bit easier for me. If I could do anything to make the grader's life a little bit easier, I'm hoping that sways the opinion. If they're like, this is kind of a 9 or a 10, they'll lean towards the 10. When you send cards out, the biggest thing that people don't talk about is there is risk. Now, risks are in all shapes and sizes here. From cards getting lost in the mail, to cards getting damaged during shipping, to cards getting damaged when they get to the grading company. Not to mention there's also thefts. People stealing packages, whether it's when you send it, whether it's the mailman, whether it's when it gets sent back to your house. One of the key things to remember with PSA, at least, is that they require a signature for a reason. When I send something back from PSA that got graded, they do not drop it off at my house unless I sign for it. So that is a definite plus. Keep in mind, there's always risks. There's risks the second you ship your card. From your doorstep to their doorstep, a lot of things can happen. The second the card or box or the cards that you are shipping gets to the grading company, you can take a sigh of relief. You're good. And at that point, when they send it back, I know we talked about the signature. When they send it back, it's on them now. So that's why they have those, how much the card is worth or the value, because God forbid they send it back and it gets stolen between their place and your house, they're liable, not you. So keep that in mind as well. Now, my final advice, if you're new, start slow, learn your eye and being able to see things on the card, and don't chase grading for profit immediately. Grade to learn first, and then scale up. At the end of the day, grading isn't about luck. It's discipline, it's patience, and it's knowing when not to send a card. If you just look at a card and go, screw it, I'm sending it, you're really gambling, and it could cost you. All right, if you enjoyed this episode, make sure to follow the podcast wherever you're listening, and check out my content over on Instagram at Entei's Inferno TCG. Otherwise, I appreciate you being here, and I'll catch you in the next one.